Okay, so let's dive right into this explainer and completely demystify the fascinating and sometimes kind of weird world of fractions from your math chapter. If you've ever felt like fractions are just playing by their own secret set of rules, well, you are absolutely not alone. But today, we're going to break this whole chapter down together. Because, as we'll see, fractions aren't actually trying to trick us. They just have a really unique, really brilliant way of interacting with the world.
We've got a super clear roadmap for tackling this today. Number 1, multiplying with fractions. 2, the incredible shrinking product. 3, the division reversal. And finally, number 4, math through history. Let's just jump right in.
All right, section 1, multiplying with fractions. We are building straight on the basics here.
So, we start with a really familiar concept right out of the text. Imagine this guy, Aaron. If Aaron walks 3 kilometers an hour for 5 hours, we just multiply 5 by 3 to get 15 kilometers, right? I mean, it's just repeated addition. Pretty standard. But what about his slow-moving pet tortoise? This little guy only manages 1/4 of a kilometer in a single hour.
Now here's the crucial question. If the tortoise only walks a fraction of a kilometer, literally 1/4 of a kilometer per hour, how do we calculate that distance for 3 hours? Does the whole foundation of math suddenly change just because we tossed a fraction into the mix?
No way. The beautiful thing about math is that it is incredibly consistent. The operation absolutely does not change just because the type of number did. We simply multiply 3 by 1/4, which gives us 3/4 of a kilometer. Think of it as adding 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. It's the exact same logic we used for Aaron, just, scaled way down to a turtle's pace.
And to really wrap our heads around this, it helps to think about it visually, like a giant puzzle. If you picture a square that is exactly 1 unit by 1 unit, and you map out a section that has a length of 1/2 and a breadth of 1/4, what do you actually get? You get a tiny rectangle. And if you count them up, exactly 8 of those little rectangles fit perfectly into the whole unit square. So 1/2 multiplied by 1/4 equals an area of 1/8 of the total square. You are literally just multiplying the numerators together and the denominators together. Simple as that.
Moving on to section 2, the incredible shrinking product. We're about to bust a massive myth here.
Ever since you first learned your times tables, you've probably thought that multiplication always makes things bigger, right? 3 times 5 is 15. Boom, bigger. But actually, scratch that. It's not always true. When you multiply 2 fractions that are strictly less than 1, take 3/4 times 2/5, for example. The product, which is 3/10, is actually less than both of the original numbers. Multiplying by a fraction is essentially taking a piece of a piece, which means the final product actually shrinks. Mind blown, right?
You can visualize this shrinking effect perfectly if you picture dividing up a square. Say you take a quarter section of a square, and then you only want half of the area of that quarter. Well, half of a quarter is 1/8. You started with a quarter, you multiplied it by a half, and your result, 1/8, is even smaller than what you started with. It's a total fundamental shift in how we think about multiplication, proving for sure that a fraction of a fraction gets smaller.
Okay, section 3, the division reversal. Prepare to flip your expectations completely upside down. So when dividing whole numbers, the answer, the quotient, almost always gets smaller. 6 divided by 3 is 2. We know that. But what happens when we take that exact same 6 and divide it by a fraction, like 1/4? The answer totally skyrockets to 24. Wait, what? Why? Well, because division is really just asking how many 1/4 can fit into 6. Since 4 quarters fit into just 1 whole, 24 of them fit into 6. The quotient is literally greater than the dividend.
Now, to unlock the secret of calculating this kind of fraction division quickly, we need a secret weapon. It's a concept called a reciprocal, and it is incredibly straightforward. You literally just flip the numerator and the denominator. So the reciprocal of 2/3, it's 3/2. The reciprocal of 1/4 is 4/1, or, just 4. And the absolute magic of a reciprocal is that if you multiply any fraction by its reciprocal, the answer is always exactly 1.
We can use this ancient technique, actually credited to the Indian mathematician Brahmagupta, to easily divide fractions. It's basically a math cheat code. You never actually have to divide at all. You just turn every single division problem into a multiplication problem. Step 1, keep the first number exactly as it is. Step 2, change that division sign into a multiplication sign. Step 3, flip the second fraction, the divisor, into its reciprocal. And then, just multiply straight across like we did back in section 1. It turns a seemingly complex division problem into a super simple multiplication task.
All right, Section 4, Math Through History. Let's look at some ancient fraction puzzles.
It turns out, human beings have been wrestling with and totally mastering these exact same rules for a really long time. The chapter highlights this famous mathematical text called the Patagonita. It was written by Sridhar Acharya way back in the 9th century.
In his book, he threw down this crazy puzzle for his readers. Find the sum of dividing 1 by all of these different fractions. 1 divided by 1/6 plus 1 divided by 1/10, and so on. Now, if you don't know the trick, this looks like an absolute nightmare to calculate. But using our new reciprocal rule, it is completely effortless. 1 divided by 1/6 is just 1 times 6, which is 6. So the whole messy problem instantly transforms into simple addition. 6 plus 10 plus 13 plus 9 plus 2. Boom! The answer perfectly evaluates to 40. Sridhar Acharya knew the massive power of the reciprocal well over 1,000 years ago.
And then there's this incredibly dramatic quote from the 12th century book Lilavati by Bhaskaracharya. It shows that understanding fraction multiplication has always been the key to solving really complex real-world riddles. He frames this massive chain of fraction multiplications as a story about a miserly donation to a beggar. Here's a pro tip. When you see the word of in math, like 1/5 of 1/16, it is a massive glowing clue to multiply. These ancient scholars were teaching us that fractions are exactly how we describe the intricate sharing and dividing of resources in the real world.
So, we've seen today that fractions are actually beautifully logical once you know their secrets. Multiplying two fractions less than 1 shrinks the result, while dividing by a fraction magically makes your number explode in size. And remember, these aren't just dry textbook formulas. They are timeless rules discovered centuries ago that still perfectly describe our universe today. So, keeping Brahmagupta's reciprocal trick and those ancient puzzles of the Patagonita in your back pocket, how are you going to apply these timeless rules to totally master your very next math challenge?